So Noni Madueke seems to be edging closer to the exit door from Chelsea on his way to Arsenal. But are we going to see more exits over the next few weeks as Chelsea return home from the Club World Cup? Please do give me your thoughts on Noni Madueke and everything we speak about in today's show. Please go and check out my Club World Cup review of the Fluminense game, where of course Chelsea made their way to the final on Sunday. We await to find out who they face, and it will be one of course, PSG or Real Madrid. But I wanted to make a show today about Chelsea transfer, some of the news around it. Actually, quite recently, we had a report from David Ornstein about Arsenal making direct contact now with Chelsea. I also want to speak a little bit about the goalkeeping situation, Georgia Petravic, and also a little bit about Josh Achimpong, filtered in there as well with Christopher Nkunku. So obviously I think the big place to start is Noni Madueke. Not exactly breaking news in the sense that, oh wow, like Noni Madueke might be on his way to Arsenal. We've been speaking about this issue at least for a week, maybe a bit more. But now we know that Arsenal have made contact with Chelsea. The clubs are now in talks, as David Ornstein reports, and we already know personal terms are not an issue. Matt Law reported earlier today that this was going to come, and basically Arsenal were expected to approach Chelsea directly. I think the big question here, of course, from a Chelsea point of view, and for me, based on accepting this deal, is the fee has to be good for Chelsea. It has to be, for me, 55 million or over. Based on what we've just seen Anthony Elanga go from Forest to Newcastle, I've brought these examples up before, what Chelsea have paid for Jamie Gittins, what Chelsea have paid for Joao Pedro, what Chelsea have been quoted for Alejandro Garnacho, or other clubs have been quoted for him. So in the market, Madueke, for me, has to be going for that fee. I wrote a Substack piece that I definitely suggest you go and read. I know many people, thanks to those watching, listening, who have subscribed to my Substack. If you haven't checked out my recent piece, which was all about Noni Madueke and the pros and cons for and against for selling him to a rival like Arsenal, please go and check that out, because of course we've covered that kind of in depth. But in terms of the fee, if Chelsea get well compensated, it kind of does feel like an inevitability now. I've said this over a week now. I think this deal will get done. I think there is a clamour clearly from the player side to make a move to Arsenal. Then it becomes a question of how Chelsea react to that situation. Now, there are several ways. Either Chelsea go in the market actively and sign another right winger or left winger or attacking option. Mohamed Kudus still hasn't officially made a move to Spurs, so it's not like that deal is a foregone conclusion. If they get well compensated. Also, will that money be used in another area? I think maybe it should be used in another area. Or will we see player futures in the current squad change? And this is where I want to bring up more a theory or conversation, or just a question for you. It regards Christopher Nkunku. Now, we have to make it clear at this point, all of the reporting, and I mentioned this in my review last night of the Fluminense game, that despite Nkunku's continued inclusion for Enzo Maresca, to all of our amazement during the Club World Cup, the expectation is he is still on the sales list. He is still in the shop window. Arguably, that's the logic behind maybe playing him a bit more in the Club World Cup. Bayern Munich have been linked. I think at this point, Bayern Munich for me has always felt like a very natural fit for Christopher Nkunku to return to the country and the league where he kind of staked his reputation and made him such a valuable player, and why Chelsea went out and signed him from Leipzig in the first place. But, we have to state that at the start. The likelihood, the percentage chance is, I still think, realistic that Christopher Nkunku by the end of this summer will no longer be a Chelsea player. And to be fair, that's the way we have felt about Christopher Nkunku for many, many months now, as far back as January. However, I do ponder if Madueke is leaving the club, and the way Chelsea and Maresca are starting to adapt the system to fit in inside forward, players, just the fluidity. Let's just use that phrase, fluidity. Whether they're playing left wing, right wing, number 10, up front, whatever it is, there's a fluidity and a Swiss Army knife type idea of the current attacking group that nearly all of those players can play in a variety of areas. And Nkunku fits that mould, but Nkunku fits a mould of kind of that second striker, not exactly a number 9, maybe not even a number 10. And that working for him currently at Chelsea or into the future of Chelsea, where it hasn't before because Maresca wasn't using roles like that before the Club World Cup. And that is the big question. I mean, would you persist with Christopher Nkunku? Some people have looked at his performances and been encouraged. I mean, I don't think his performances have been dreadful, but I don't think his performances have been a runaway success to a point where he is doing things that are even akin to what he was doing in pre-season before. They're not that big a deal. They're not that obvious, a statement like João Pedro, for instance, made against Fluminense. So I think you have to factor that in as well, that although I'm not saying that Nkunku's been a disaster and he's done absolutely nothing, I think if I'm just looking at kind of my just brutal assessment of it as someone who likes the talent of the player and likes the potential of the player, and maybe, we've kind of wasted it a little bit at Chelsea, I don't think his performances, with the exception of the major goal he scored against Benfica, been a runaway success. But are you now kind of more open to the chance of Nkunku staying? As I say, bear in mind what's likely to happen. And also Chelsea have to sell. They are gaining a lot of money from the Club World Cup. And I just want to say this right here. Whatever happens on Sunday, and I know that's not how fans feel about this, whatever happens on Sunday in the Club World Cup final, I think Chelsea's moneymen, Chelsea's owners will already see the Club World Cup as a success, as a win for Chelsea, based on the money they have made from this tournament. Some people have made really good deep dives in kind of how this tournament could really change football. The investment and the money Chelsea will get from just being in this tournament and getting as far as they have is huge. Given the UEFA deal, the FFP bridge that Chelsea and the fee that Chelsea have to pay, the reality that Chelsea have to make sales. Now I'm pretty confident of Chelsea's ability to make sales. Noni Madueke, if you're getting upwards of 60 million for him, there's a good sale there. I think if you sell Christopher Nkunku, it's probably going to be between 40 to 50 million. I still think in the current market. Even João Felix, my brutal assessment of the player, I think if you're getting over 10 million for him, you're getting a good deal. But we know João Felix, for some reason, still gets a decent fee in this market. I don't know why, but I think he could get one. Axel Disasi. We know Ben Chilwell will likely be off as well this summer. Where will Raheem Sterling end up? There are players who will still, I think, attract a fee in this current Chelsea squad, but that's just a question on Nkunku. I want to move on to goalkeeper, primarily because it is still the big kind of bad and concerning part of Chelsea's transfer window for me. It still is the unknown. So we know that Bournemouth are in advanced talks with Chelsea over Georgia Petravic. Chelsea apparently still seeking around 30 million euros. 25 million pounds is the quote, and the price has been quoted a number of times already. And there is a pact with Petravic allowing him to leave for this number, but the clubs are yet to agree a fee. Now, cards on the table, I really don't understand the logic, if this is the logic, of selling Georgia Petravic if you're not going to replace him with anyone. Mike Penders, there's chatter about him going on loan to Strasbourg, which I think could be a decent loan, absolutely, for him. I'm firmly against Mike Penders sticking around if he isn't going to be first choice, because it's a waste of time for his development. But obviously, what is going on in terms of incomings of a potential new goalkeeper, which I think a majority of Chelsea fans believed was one of the vital positions that needed to be strengthened this summer. One of the ways that we could have done it was to keep Georgia Petravic. That's clearly not happening. And you risk walking into another season where now Bournemouth have a better goalkeeper than us, and you walk into another situation where Robert Sanchez is first choice. I know recently we've had it from AC Milan directly that the deal is off. Now, I've seen situations even at this point in the summer when you get briefs and even direct quotes from a club that the deal is off. There were quotes from the family of Victor Gyökeres quite recently that there's no way he's leaving Sporting Lisbon. And of course, he's likely to leave Sporting Lisbon for Arsenal. So just because a club comes out and says a player's not for sale, I mean, Chelsea do it themselves at times, and then a player still is kind of up for sale, and if a right fee comes in, if a right deal comes in, then they can make that move. We know AC Milan financially are not in an incredible position, and still could probably, and their ownership has been known to sell some of their best players despite fan frustration about that. I still think Chelsea, if they went in for a deal for Mike Maignan, I think that deal's still a possibility. We know from the player side, at least, that's very much an open possibility. And I just think it's an open goal. and it's one that you cannot afford to let slip. I'm watching the development of this Chelsea team at the moment under Enzo Maresca, who's proved me and a lot of other people wrong, and being excited by what we're watching, which could mean we're world champions by this time next week. And the development of the squad, the development of players, the players coming in and being overly positive with the signings that have been made so far and could still happen in this window. And I'm looking at the goalkeeping position where just get him a good goalkeeper. And it's not me, we're not dreaming up names here. I'm not dreaming up Gianluigi Donnarumma, Edison, Alisson, where Chelsea have no chance probably of signing those players this summer. You had someone there, and the intention was to sign someone and sign someone really good who walks into our starting lineup. And I think it would gain so much credit. I think it would show such a signal of intent, and I think the influence that a player like Maignan at this stage of his career could have on the dressing room, which is already, I think, in a much better place than it was, say, a year ago in terms of what this team has experienced and achieved, I think would be huge. You'd argue the two maybe joint first most important positions on a football pitch for a team still, despite all the tactical evolution and all the ways the game has changed in certain aspects. Goalkeeper and striker. One, both win you games. One more so than the other can cost you games pretty directly. And Chelsea have felt the impact of that with Rob Sanchez. And this is not saying that Rob Sanchez can never have a good game again for Chelsea. Has never had a good game for Chelsea. I don't assess players like that. We take a broader view here. But are you seriously comfortable with Rob Sanchez being our starting goalkeeper against Crystal Palace? If that is the scenario and that's the way they're going, I don't think many people will be happy or sit there and go, we've invested heavily in other areas, but not this over, problematic area that has been overlooked for so long. So those are my thoughts. The only other quick thing I just wanted to touch before we wrap this show is there was a report out from the Telegraph that I think Mike McGrath was reporting it, that Crystal Palace have inquired about Josh Achimpong. We've heard before that Borussia Dortmund have inquired about Josh Achimpong. Another player there's no point in loaning him. I think it'd be a bad move. Malo Gusto has impressed in recent games, but this season is as important more than ever of having a strong squad and having depth. And we speak about that fluidity. Josh Achimpong fits into that perfectly more than Malo Gusto does. Because Josh Achimpong, I think, could play a right-back role where he's able to venture forward with the ball, but he can play centre-back, he can play right centre-back. We even saw him briefly in the Conference League. Of course, we need to stress test this against a better level of opposition, but we even saw him move into central midfield a little bit from Maresca. I want to keep Josh Achimpong because I think he's a really, really good talent. I think he looks composed, ready for more first team minutes, and try and develop him further. And you don't know what's going to happen this season. And I think it's the reason why we need depth in key positions. It's why I keep on talking about not just certain other areas of the squad that need improvement, but in terms of depth, why I think left back is another area that has to be addressed before the end of this window. Because you can't have a scenario where Motka Correa is basically our only first choice left back or only suitable left back cover for the entirety of the season. That's unacceptable. But I do think Josh Achimpong, who maybe could play off the left as well, needs to be kept. Those are my thoughts at the moment. So we're really positive about what's going on at the Club World Cup. I think Maresca is getting a lot of credit, and rightly so. I think the players are rightly so. João Pedro's debut was ridiculous. You can go and check my thoughts on not only last night's game, but all the games in the Club World Cup from a Chelsea perspective. If you haven't already, you can read my piece on Substack about Noni Madueke, for and against selling him. But I do think at this point, realistically, I think he will be leaving Chelsea, and hopefully Chelsea and should be absolutely getting a good deal for that. I think the question for you, the question for all of us, and the question for Chelsea is what happens after the sale of Noni Madueke, if that is the route we're going down. Is it to act for another attacking player, or are you much more intent, given the signings of Jamie Gittins, Liam Delap and João Pedro, to look elsewhere? Because you've got Esteban Willian coming in, you've got the players you already have and could get better. So those are my thoughts. Please let me know yours in the comments down below. Quick thing, please go and check out me and Louis Benavente's regular Chelsea podcast, the Chelsea Echo, where we cover everything around the club as well. If you haven't checked that out, please go and do so. I will leave a link in the description box below for that. And follow across the socials at SonOfChelsea, and I will see you again very, very soon. All the best.